we have more buttons we want to add. So all this document.createElement business is going to get old. It would be so much easier if we could just write the HTML. So let's take a whole different approach. First we did inner HTML. Now we're doing createElement. Let's do another thing. Here's what I want to do. I want to just make an example LI and actually put it in my HTML, and we'll hide it. Then we'll make copies of that, just changing the parts that ought to change. You know what I'm saying? I have an invisible LI. I'll make a copy of that. I'll change the parts that are specific to my spell. I'll put that on the page. Sound good? All right, so here's my, I want the LI to be something like this. So this for now, this will be a refactoring, right? We're not going to add any buttons on this step. We're just going to make it work like this. So let's find the LI. Here we go. Right click, copy outer HTML. That'll give me the LI. And I'm just going to stick it in the HTML inside my UL. So there'll just be one there already. We'll worry about hiding it later. Okay, we could use some line breaks in there. Cool. So we don't really need this to say sidif. It should just be blank. So I don't really need the title attributes on there. So now the class names are already there. I got my text in the delete button. So I can just make a copy of that and change the details. So yeah, there's a little empty one already there, but we'll deal with that later. We'll hide it. So I'm going to use this LI as my template. So I'm going to add a class called template. There's nothing magic about that class name. I made it up just so I have a way to identify this. And eventually I'm going to use CSS to target that to make anything with that class invisible. But for right now, that's what I'm going to target to make a copy of it. So let's see if we can make a copy of it. How do we make a copy of things? Attack of the clones. Yeah. All right, so I've got my LI highlighted here, so it's $0. $0 dot cloneNode. Looks like a thing. So let's say item equals $0 cloneNode. Hey, it's an LI. But look, there's nothing in it. It's completely empty. That is a very poor clone. Let's look it up on our good friends, MDN, the web docs. cloneNode. Why you know do what I expect. cloneNode returns a duplicate of the node on which this method was called. Okay, syntax cloneNode. Looks like there's an optional argument called deep. The argument, true if the children of the node should also be cloned, or false to clone only the specified node. We want the children, right? We want all those spans, so we just need to make it deep. So cloneNode, something like that. True. Hey, there we go. Now it's got stuff in it. So render item is going to be totally different now. I'll leave the old code there, but instead of building an item from scratch, let's make a copy of that rascal. So document.querySelector, something with a class of spell and a class of template. You understand why there's no space, right? What would that mean? That would mean something with a class of, whoops. That would mean nothing. That would mean something with a class of template inside something with a class of spell. This means something with both classes. Then we want to clone it. Resumes, man. Tell you what. I'm going to do this. I'm going to grab this thing up in init and save it as a property. I'm going to say this.template equal document.querySelector spell template. So I don't have to grab it over and over. So I don't have to run query selector every time. Plus that makes this shorter. This.template.cloneNode. True. Don't forget the true. All right, so now I have a copy. What do I need to do to it? I need to change all the parts that are specific to my spell. So looking at the HTML, I need to put the name inside this name span. I need to put the level inside this level span. I need to put titles on both of them. All right. So we get all the properties of the object, right? Which right now is just name and level. But it could be more. And before, what we're doing is creating all the spans. We don't need to do that anymore. We also don't need to create the item. We don't need to add the spell class. It's already there. We don't need to append the spans to the LI. They're already there. But what do we need to do? We need to grab all the spans and change their text content. So those spans are going to have class names that match these things, right? The properties of my object. So I want to loop over this thing, and for each of them, I want to find the span and change its text content. With me? So object.keys will return me an array of all of the keys from this object. And for each one of those things, I need to find a span and change its text content. So let's go properties.forEach. Each one of those things is going to be a single property. We talked about leaving the parentheses off, a single argument to an arrow function. Did we do that yesterday? Okay, I did it in the morning class then. In an arrow function, if you only have one argument, you can leave the parentheses off and just say that argument, arrow function. If you have no arguments, you need the empty parentheses. But if you have exactly one, you can leave it off. Just shorter syntax. Yeah. I'm sorry, a little louder. The only special thing about the arrow is that it binds this. Yeah, the only special thing about it is that it binds this. Other than that, it's just convenient syntax. Yeah. So what do we want to do? We want to find the spans, right? How do I do that? So the first time this callback is called, property will be name. How do I find the span to put that name in there? So property is just a string. It's just the string name. So I need to actually find the span that has that as a class. So I have the string span, and I want to find, I have the string name, and I want to find a span with a class of name. So I should use query selector and pass that in there with a dot in front of it, right? If I do document.querySelector, it'll find the first one on the page, which may or may not be the one inside this item, right? But in addition to document.querySelector, you can call querySelector on any other element, and it will only look inside that element. So I can say item.querySelector and look for dot whatever the property is. In other words, if I call this with name, it'll find something with a class of name. If level is passed in as property, it'll look for dot level, right? So that should find me my span. Const element equals that. And then I want to change the text content to what? What do I want to change the text content to? Yeah, I want the spell name, but how do I get that there? How do we do it? It's got to come out of that spell object, right? How do I know which thing I want out of there? What did you say, Stephen? So property tells me which one, right? Now if I do spell dot property, that's going to actually look for a property called the string property, right? Spell square bracket property. Get the difference? With the dot, you have to actually have the literal name of the thing. Square bracket, you could pass a variable in. So it wouldn't be the variable property, it would be the string property. So that ought to do it. And I think we want to set the title to that too. Did we use set attribute yesterday? Yeah. Thought so. Okay, so set attribute, title. I'll set that also to spell square bracket property. And this should do it for both name and level. I want to see if this much works, so I'm going to just comment out all this delete button business for now. By the way, comment out multiple lines, highlight them, hit Command or Control / to toggle. Also, you don't have to highlight if you just want to do like the current line, whatever line your cursor's on. So let's see what happens. Fireball. Okay, that seemed to work. Let's put a level in there too. Sleep, level 3. Yeah, totally works. They have the correct classes on them too, because this is underlined and this is red. So far, so good. Now we just need to make delete work. Does that much make sense? Because we're going to add a lot more buttons, and it's going to get really, it's going to be easier. If we had done it this way all along, it wouldn't have been any harder. But, of course, we already did it a different way, right? But now we're getting ready to add like 3 more buttons. So, no, that's fine. I understand. It's a valid question. Because it's good for you. It'll become easier. Also, some of this is to make you appreciate React. Because it's a lot easier to do some of this stuff once you get over the learning curve of just using React at all. So, okay, let's make the delete button work again. So we don't need to create the thing. We don't need to add the delete thing. We don't need to add the text. We probably need to add the event listener. So instead of creating it, we'll find it. So we just learned the trick that we can search inside an item using query selector. So item.querySelector button.delete, auto-find it. I don't think I even need to bother saving it to a variable. I'll just chain it. So item.querySelector will return the thing. Then we'll call add event listener on it. That, I don't need to append it, right? It's already there. Seems like that ought to do it. So item.querySelector button.delete will find it. Add event listener, we'll do that. Everything else should be the same. Make sense? Fireball. Here you go, here you go. Did it really work? Delete the middle one. Yeah. Cool. I think we fixed it. Create new list items Oh, wait. We're not done. We're not done. We still got this one here, right? That's ridiculous. So we said it has a class of template. So let's just add to our CSS. Anything with a class of template should be hidden. How do we hide things? Anybody know? One more time. Visible. So there's a visible property. Visibility. Hide, hidden, right. There's another way. You know the other way? Display none. Do you know the difference? With visibility hidden, it still leaves room for it on the page. We don't need to leave room for it, so we can use display none. Great, so it's hidden now, and so is the copy. It's there, but it has the class of template too, doesn't it? So right after we make the clone, let's say item.classList remove template. So the copy should not have that class anymore. Big. So as I was adding lots of these in a row, it was bothering me that my cursor stays inside level. I want to keep adding more of them. Is that bothering you too? Sleep, 3, summon, duh. All right, we can fix that. How? Yes. Eric? Okay, you're almost there. Yeah, you're almost there. Who else wanted to answer that? Somebody else wanted to answer that. I swear I saw somebody else. Anybody make this work? So how about at the end of handle submit, about the time we reset the form, we have the spell name field, right? It's right here. F.spellname is the actual input. F.spellname is .value is what we typed into it. F.spellname. If I were to tell you that there's a method built in that you can call to do this thing, what would you think it'd be called? F.spellname.focus. Fire, level 3, sleep, yep. Yeah. Cool. Moves the cursor back where we want it. Let's see. What was my last commit? Way back at adding a working delete button. Okay. So create new items as copies of a template. It was just a refactoring. It still works the same way except for that focus thing. But now we're set up well for future development. Questions?